Hey guys, welcome to another edition of On Social, the show that talks about live professional video in the social media platforms that are out there. As we all know, Facebook's huge, LinkedIn now is in the space. We've got just about a ton of different platforms, Twitch, you name it, it's out there. And we want to talk to you about how to make professional video live on these platforms the best as possible. Joining me, as always, we've got Mr. Marty McPadden from podjam.tv. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Stephen. Great to be here as always.
And we also have this is your second week in a row. We've got Mr. Jeffrey Fitzgerald from jeffandhighdef.tv.
Yeah, I can't believe it either, but hey, it's great to be here.
It's great to have you guys on here. And before we go any further, I want to thank the folks over at Telestream. I mean, they sponsor the show. This is their show. This is their branded show. You guys, a lot of you know I work for the company, but this is a show where we're able to come on here as industry professionals and talk about live video in a social atmosphere. And it's something that I think a lot of people aspire to be able to do. They want to be able to do this as part of their job. And, honestly, I get to say I get to do that as part of my job, amongst other things. So, I mean, this is really made possible. Telestream getting the best of the best, having us come on here and talk about professional live video and when I say the best of the best, they're sitting next to me. These guys here have been in the industry. They know their stuff, and I'm just humbled to be here and be able to kind of push buttons for them, so to speak, as we talk about social media and live video. And guys, one of the big topics that has come up is streamlining your workflow, and that's today's discussion topic post. A lot of people, they get set up for a show, and every week their setup changes, and they can never start on time. They can never end on time. They can never get moving. And I know, Marty, you've got a bunch of different tips that you've kind of put together for us today to kind of help users better their broadcast and streamline it a little bit better. I mean, when I get going, we get in here, I go through a certain regimen that I go through to turn things on, to make sure everything's turned on in a certain order, to make sure it works. Again, my stuff is streamlined, but you also have ways of doing it a little bit more efficient for those that maybe struggle with that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and you're very good about this too. And I would think that, especially when you're starting out, I'm looking down on my notes to make sure I cover everything here. But it all starts with a plan, right? There's one thing I see a lot of people when they live stream. A lot of people do it casually. You just pop in, you start your live stream on Facebook or YouTube, and you just start talking. Those are casual live streams. Usually they're done from mobile devices and things, and that's one sort of live stream. But we're probably talking about more of a higher end business style live stream where you may have guests come in and all that. And that's where the plan really comes in, and where I start with is creating a rundown. And this kind of comes from television. When you're doing a television show, you have what's called a rundown or a script, and you're basically outlining your segments. And what I do is I always have a plan of where I want to go, and it's not a question of scripting everything out perfectly and to the letter, but it's an idea of, like, especially if you have multiple segments, what topics do you want to cover in general? And again, if you know your topic, you should be able to do that. But just having a plan of action, maybe having an approximate amount of time that you want to cover, especially if you're trying to hit a certain time. But having a plan going in, that's part of the 90%, the pre-work that goes into it. Jeff, I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that, but that's kind of where I start this whole thing.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it on the head. In TV, it is literally down to the millisecond because you've got to fit windows for ads, and the segments are mapped out. Live streaming doesn't have to be that, like you said, that minutia, but I would say down to the minutes probably a really, really cool idea. And I think that it's not just a technical preparation that helps your show and helps you, as you said, go where you're going. The bigger thing that I think is the value of having a rundown is that if you really pay attention to TV, especially news and magazine shows, there's a rhythm, there's a cadence to it. And there's a pace to it that, when you listen to a podcast, for instance, as the other kind of example, it's open-ended. We can talk for hours, and it never really seems like there's any direction. People in television and in news especially know how to get to the point pretty quick and not lose data, but really learn how to bring the best to the surface as quickly as possible. And that rundown will help you do that. So if you've got 3 minutes with somebody to speak, it's not going to start off with, hey guys, and you're, introducing 15 people in the chat. It's, you've got to plan for that. Hey, there's 30 seconds before I bring my guest in. So there's a lot of value in having a rundown, especially when you begin to think about your show in segmented pieces and really where the value lies. And, you can even build your show from one point of value to something maybe a little softer, bring someone else in, and then your big guest is at the end because you want to have people stay with you through your show. So there's a lot of intelligence behind it, and it always pays off when you plan.
I think too, what some people forget is, and they kind of laugh because family members will come in my studio and they'll see I have clocks on my wall, and I'll have them behind me, and I have them even imposed on screens. And they're like, "Well, why do you run a clock when you're streaming?" And Jeff, you hit the nail on the head, because sometimes when you're discussing a topic, people want to keep going with it, but yet you have to move on in order to accomplish that. And I know it's the internet, right? But I guess from my standpoint, I always try to keep people, because you want to make sure everybody gets their their words in, right?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I mean, unless you're talking about Elvis or peanut butter and chocolate, I think you need to have a limit on what that looks like, right?
Yeah.
And I can do either. I love the king. Thank you very much. But yeah, there's no doubt about it. Marty very nicely set this up, that you have to have an idea on where you're going to go. And the thing I loved about what he said the most, just like a pilot, you always want to know where you're going to land, and that means that you're planning that something may not go the way you want it to. So, for instance, if you've got a guest and this is your only guest on your show, and it's a minute before, and you should have done a setup, a day early to check with them, and then 15 minutes before, an hour before, and nobody's around, what are you going to do? Are you going to do the whole show yourself and just kind of sit there and eat your lunch? Or do you have a backup plan, and you've got your best buddy in standby in Zoom or however you're bringing them in? And it's like, you guys have a plan on what you're going to do. And that rundown will help you get there.
Yeah, and to add in what Jeff just said, kind of the second part of that, especially if you're doing these live streams and you have other people that you're counting on, maybe a guest or some other piece of information that you're going to cover. If something goes wrong, if you can't get that guest, or if you can't get that piece of information, what do you do? And as part of your rundown, not only do you want to map out some segments and timing. So, segment 1, about 5 minutes, what Stephen mentioned about the clock. I mean, if you want to stay on time and you want to really map that out and have a good idea of your pacing of your show, but also at the end, have some segments that are alternate segments, that in case something goes wrong at the end of your rundown, that you can bring up into your main show and you have to go to. So alternate, you may not get to those, but have them ready to go. The other thing is, when you do your rundown, you want to prioritize your information. And this is especially true if you're doing an interview show and you're scripting out your questions. Have your most important questions up front, but also have a few extra ones that maybe, depending on how talkative the guest is, you may or may not get to it, whatever, that you can cut out on the fly or add in on the fly. Because again, with live, as Stephen and as all three of us know, we've been in these situations. You never know what's going to happen. It could be a technical failure or some challenge, or it could be a content failure that you need to go to alternate content. So have just something ready to go just in case, which is very, very important.
So going forward, one of the things I know we do a lot of testing here when we're streaming live, and we don't just go jumping in. And in fact, the viewers that have been asking about Telestream doing a live production for a couple months, they were like, "Whoa, wait, there's no show. What's going on?" We were behind the scenes doing run-throughs, going through testing, trying to find out the direction we wanted to take the show, getting co-hosts, finding topics, going through that, doing our due diligence, again, planning this out to streamline it. So now when we sit down and do it, it's just like, it's like riding a bike, right? You just kind of sit down and you're ready to go. So these are a lot of different things. I like your point about that, going through some kind of technical rehearsal or getting something going. We even do that here, even though we do this every week, right? We get on early enough so that everybody can make sure audio levels are good. Sometimes, mics need adjusting, and that can happen from time to time, but
that never happens with me, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it happens with everybody.
It happens with everybody.
I mean, that kind of dovetails into, I'll share it now, kind of tease a little bit later in the show, but I have a new piece of equipment that I've introduced into my signal chain. And Stephen's very, very right there. I mean, we've been doing this a long time, but we get on a half hour before and we establish connections. And that just gives us time to make sure that, okay, is everything working, everything going, ready to go? We can talk a little bit. And even if we don't talk the whole time, that's fine. But at least we know that everything's working. You know, we build that time in. But today, especially, I had a little bit of a challenge with a new piece of equipment. I was getting set, some settings I was getting used to. And so we had to do a little quick little troubleshoot, like 5 minutes. But we got to figure it out. But because we had that extra time, it wasn't we weren't panicked. We were able to go through what's going on, check their system. That's good. I even adjusted my camera shot. You know, is everything's good? I mean, as long as you're building time in the beginning, that's why that, you know, if you're expecting to launch your live stream about a minute before and then things go wrong, expect things to go wrong, you know. But if you allow yourself some extra time, even if you don't use the time, then at least you have a buffer time that you can at least address any issue, and they are bound to come up no matter how professional you are. And today was a good example. As we weren't rushed. We were able to figure out what we did, and had plenty of time to come on and do a pre-show, and we're ready to go. So that your checklist and your regiment, Stephen, really fits well and really comes in handy today. Most weeks it comes in handy very, very well.
Well, even Jeff, I mean, we were able to get Jeff. You know, Jeff, you called in what, like 15 minutes before the show starts. You're on. You're in.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that. You know, having a dedicated place, a space. I like the word studio because mine looks a lot like TV. That's the world I come from. But you know, the reality is, whoever you are at whatever level, the more that you can dedicate equipment and peripherals and the space itself to what you're doing, you're always going to have a much more consistent look. Here I've got built-in lighting, which is, you know, crazy to think that I put holes in the wall, but to me, having consistent look is great. Flick, you know, the switch and it will always look the way you want it to. But anything you can do to that end, even if it's not quite that extreme, it will put a lot of the questions to rest that you might have when something's going wrong. You're like, oh my gosh, this isn't working. And instead of thinking about the 80 things it could be, you know that 50 or 60 or 70 of them, you know, are already taken care of. It will help you get through that a lot faster because you now know where you're going with that and what you're trying to do to troubleshoot. So, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And even though I called in, you know, 15, 20 minutes ahead, you're exactly right. There's always something in the chain between the antenna, you know, the stream, the audio, the positioning, all those things. There's a lot of work to make it really look the way you want it to look. And it's small things in aggregate that make a show really exceptional. It's not just the personality or the look. You know, one of the things I posted today that I found that I'd done for a couple clients, if you go to facebook.com, Jeff and High Def, I've got a meme up there, or an infographic, I guess is probably a better word, that basically outlines, you know, what that looks like. You know, you need three things to be a star, and that is your creative, your production, and your message. And without those three, if you're missing one of them, it will be a deficit there somewhere. And if you take a look at that, it'll give you more information on it. But absolutely, Steve, you've got to be ready. Even though you're getting in 15, 20 minutes before, you're going to use every bit of that time being ready for your live show.
I just pulled up that infographic that you can kind of elaborate here on it. The balance of star powers and live streaming.
I didn't want to take all the time here. Basically, the way this works is that the words in between each of those 3 points on the triangle, simulated triangle there, basically, if you've got creative and a message, that's great, but the show may look amateur and the audience may perceive a lower value because you're not thinking about things like lighting, you're out of focus, no one can really hear you that well. If you've got message and production, the show will be really solid, but it also may appear to be bland and predictable, maybe cookie cutter. And if you've got creative and production only without a message, well, that's great. The show looks wonderful. It's visually strong, but the audience perceives a lack of focus and a narrative, which to me is the most important part, which is why you do what you do. It's your message. It's your why. And so I think that if you can hit it home to get those three pieces, those three elements together, I think it's going to do wonders for you.
And that's something I think, Marty, kind of adding to under your test category here. If you're doing like I have 2 co-hosts that are doing the show or jumping on as a guest, whatever. I don't wait until these guys get on and say, hang on, guys, I got to go set up LinkedIn. I got to go set up Facebook. I got to go set up. No, I have all that done prior to these guys getting on so I can focus my attention and troubleshoot anything that they're doing so that way we can make sure that we are, you know, we're not doing 50 things and changing 50 things at one time and we're breaking just as much as we're fixing, if that makes sense. I think that's
Yeah,
something that's key.
absolutely. And it kind of leads me to a kind of the next section here, which is the testing. And this is especially important if and a lot of people do interview shows, live interview shows, and normally they might be very familiar with their equipment and setup. If you go through and establish your workflow, but your guest probably isn't unless they're a professional. And so that's where the testing comes in. I know when I do live streams for clients, one of the things I build into my workflow is always testing, not only with the host, I do that all the time too, especially if I work with them on a regular basis, still do the test, especially for connection, but also with their guest. And what I find is normally the guest many times is not used to doing live video. They're doing it for the first time. They usually have a laptop. They don't have any professional lighting or microphones or all that stuff. Maybe a webcam if we're lucky. Lots of times it's built in. So not only you want to test that internet connection, because a lot of people work on Wi-Fi, and we all know that if you're doing this professionally, you want to have a wired connection. We've gone through that in other shows, all the things you need to do, but you're working with people that aren't used to it. So you want to test it. Not only does it give you an opportunity to test to make sure that they have the bandwidth, which is number one, but also it gives you a chance to kind of go through, get to know them, put them at ease, review what to expect. And then that's a big thing with your guests. Normally, especially if they're not used to being on camera, review the run. That's why the rundown's important. Review the rundown, what to expect on the show. Here are some of the questions we're going to ask. Here's what to expect from the host. Is your camera angle good? I always review with them, because normally what they'll do is they'll set their laptop and they'll sit on the desk. And we all have seen this where they look down on the desk and their camera angle's all wrong. So I give them tips, just quick little pointers. Raise that camera up. Be in a brightly lit room. Make sure you're wearing earphones. I test out their audio. Lots of times we're working with their built-in mic, so we have to do the best we can, be in a quiet room. But we go through all that and make sure that they're good and ready to go and comfortable, so that by the time they come in, and usually I do it the day before, a couple days before, and then by the time they come in, and I always establish my connections if I'm producing a show for somebody, I always have the guest and the host come in 20 to 30 minutes before at a bare minimum. And then I bring them in and, make sure they're talking, make sure everything's set. And it gives everyone a chance to just kind of get their feet under them, get comfortable. And by the time we hit air at the top of the hour, everyone's ready to go, comfortable. And that's just so important. I think a lot of people, when we talk about that, they see, they see it almost as a waste of time. And then they wonder, they don't think about that part. They just are concentrating on the part about being on the show. And if you're not doing the pre-work and the testing, then you hit air, and then they wonder, why am I having all these issues? And they're bound to come up. It happens to us all the time. But we build that into our schedule to make sure we can deal with unforeseen issues. But especially if you're working with people that aren't used to being on camera, this is all part of that preparation, along with the rundown. The technical testing and preparation, making sure everyone's good, is very, very important. And Jeff, I'm not sure if you have anything to add to that, but that's kind of like what I go through every single time with my workflow.
I think it's critical. I mean, that is the right way to do it, because you're making a lot of assumptions. And I mean, it really depends on like what level do you want to do live stream. This show is all about those of us that believe in the power user, want to do it in a way that's very similar to what TV looks like. Part of that is that you don't want to just look great yourself. You want your guests to look good. And I mean, that goes from everything that you covered, even to pointing out to them something that they may not even see for themselves. Maybe they've got hair that's distracting, or maybe there's something going on there where there's a light reflecting in their glasses, and there's things like that you really want to look at. But what you really want to do is eloquently covered, get the technical out of the way early so you can concentrate on having a great conversation. But if you're sitting there up to the last minute trying to figure out what's happened, it is going to affect the entire show. It will ripple through it, and it will put mediocrity in there nice and heavy. And if you're not careful, it can happen to anybody.
Absolutely. So we're getting a lot of questions in the chat room. People are asking, how we're doing this, what's the setup. So I don't want to digress away from what we're talking about, but just to answer this question, I'm manually switching the show. I'm manually producing the show. Shots are being switched. We did place in the chat room what we're using. We'll get into this in a future episode, exactly different things, different ways that we're doing things. So I just want to I don't want you guys to think we're ignoring it. We're not. We just want to kind of stay on topic with what the show's about today. And that's kind of part of it, streamlining your workflow, right? Making sure that we are using the right stuff to get the right job done. So, testing, I do a lot. I do probably more testing than I actually do live shows. I know it sounds funny, but I find myself down here, my wife will tell you, late at night, just kind of, I get an idea and I'm like, oh, I know why that didn't work. And I come down and I'll be messaging Marty. I'll be like, that's why it didn't work.
Oh yeah.
And he'll be like, well, I'm glad you figured it out. You know, it's one of those.
Yeah, well, the hook there is that you said you knew why it didn't work, which means even at the level that you're trying to aim for, stuff's happening, right? And so it's always smart to get in there and figure out what's going on, you know.
Well, it bothers me because when you know something works, right, and then it doesn't work during a broadcast, and you've done it time after time after time after time, and it didn't work, and you're going, oh yeah, this is why it didn't work, duh, you know, and you go back and you fix it, and it was. Meanwhile, you could have spent 2 hours right before the show because you're all jazzed and hyped. So I say all this to let you guys know that sometimes you got to walk away from it, accept the fact that it's broken during the show because you're going live in 2 minutes, and just walk away. And I think you guys have done that too. You've walked away only to come back later and solve the problem in maybe half the time if you would have just been pressing on it because you're thinking of 50 million things. And Marty, I mean, has that happened to you?
Absolutely, and I can't underscore enough the importance of knowing your workflow, knowing your gear. Stephen, this is a mantra of yours, know your gear, which is incredibly important. Again, everybody wants that quick start guide and wants to get up and running, which is fine. I get it. Everyone's impatient. But then never forget to go back, especially if you're new. It is worth the effort to make sure that you know your gear, read the manuals, experiment, know how things work, not just the step-by-step, but actually know how things work. I remember, Stephen, I always like to tell the story where, I was troubleshooting, setting up mix minus on a mixer I had a couple years back, and working with you and work hours and understanding how mix minus works, and then once you get that, then you can set it up on any mixer. But that's so important to when things happen or things go wrong, and in the troubleshooting, correct troubleshooting. If you don't know how things work, how are you going to actually troubleshoot it? You're wasting a lot of time because you're kind of just grasping at straws instead of actually going through a methodical process of finding what's going wrong, fixing it, and because you know how things work, that procedure is going to go very, very well. So important, and that comes along with your preparation and testing and all that stuff. But then it becomes routine, and you keep doing it over and over again. So then when something does happen, and it's bound to happen, then then it becomes a very small thing instead of a very large thing, and you don't know where to start.
And you
No, that's it. You bring up that point brings me to one thing that I remember doing 3 years ago at a national live stream conference. We were about 15 minutes to go. My main camera was having problems showing up, and we're like, "What's the problem?" We had bought a brand new HDMI cable that was, I think it was 100-foot long, and we're going through this whole process, and all of a sudden we realize, hey, this is one of these kind of HDMI cables that has a direction to it. We had it backwards, and the longer the cable has a power source, it's got to be an in and out kind of a direction flowing toward you. And what I realized from that was that the closer to your broadcast time, the less effective you're going to be at remembering and being more intelligent about these things, because the stress is completely changing everything you're thinking about. And it was just another good reminder that we've got to do better and back up a little bit and really think things through when you have the ability to think. And really a moment I didn't like, but we got through it and things were great. But sometimes that's the way it goes.
So Marty, I know we're running close on time here, but I know everybody's like, "Come on, Marty, enough with it. What's the new edition? What's going on?"
Well, it's funny because I see Richard on Facebook in the chat saying, "No more teasing. What's your new edition?" And Richard, we talk a lot about streamlining, and one of the things I just added this week, and I'm using it today, is I use Wirecast to get onto the show. So to construct my shot, I use Wirecast to do it. And normally I would be on a PC, a tower PC to do that. And I just upgraded today, this week, and I have what's called the Wirecast gear. which is basically it's sold by Telestream. Basically a very high-end specialized PC, Windows PC, that comes with Wirecast Pro. It also comes with New Blue Titler, and I think it comes with, and there's another piece of software it comes with
Switch.
that I forget. Switch, yes, thank you. And Stephen's showing the picture of it. My setup right now, and I will show it on a future show, and I'll show it in a very novel way. In the studio, it's just down below my desk here, off to the side. But again, the value of a piece of gear like this. Now, you can run Wirecast on Mac and PC very, very competently. But what I've noticed already with the gear is how much smoother it runs. And that's because it's all finely tuned to the software, the hardware there, especially the capture cards. One of the big features of this machine, it has the onboard encoding, the 4 capture cards. The version I have is the HDMI in. I have HDMI cameras, so that's what I got. Has 4 HDMI in capture cards, so I can add 4 hardwired cameras to it. I can also run NDI, if you guys are familiar with that network device interface. That means you can run video all over your IP and your networking. It comes with a Wirecast Pro, as I said before, the top level Wirecast. Comes with a year's worth of full support. That's another reason why it's great. You get full support from Wirecast. You can also extend that another 3 years. But the reason I really like it, I noticed a difference. And my PC is pretty good. It's a tower PC. It's a gaming PC. It's got a lot of beef to it, which is great. But this is really I noticed a difference because it's just finally it's tuned up, and Wirecast and Telestream have built these PCs custom to run the software, and that's the thing I noticed even immediately with this. It's really kind of upped my game a little bit. And the other thing, and this will come in future shows, it's extremely portable. Instead of taking a PC with you, this will fit in a carry-on bag. So if you're flying around and you're doing on location, which I will be doing shortly in another month or two, and we're probably going to do some video of that, showing you on the road. I'm going to show you a different use case other than live streaming for the gear, but it really simplifies and it fits right into our theme of streamlining your production, where it's one box. Everything's there. You take it, you plug it in, you're ready to go. So I think for businesses and for folks that are getting involved, again, it's an investment. Certainly, it's not inexpensive, but if you're doing this for a business, it's certainly well worth it. And I've noticed a difference already.
And that's something you've done before. I mean, Jeff, we all have separate machines. We set things up to make sure we streamline it so one machine isn't doing everything. And I know some people have to do that. But like Marty's saying, when you're able to separate your workflow a little bit, yeah, you have extra machines, but what it's doing is you're taking the load off other machines, and that particular machine is doing one thing and one task only, and that's to be your video producer. It's not being your call-in manager. It's not doing all this other stuff when you're doing
that's it.
High-end stuff, right?
Oh, absolutely, Steve. It's one of these things where, if you really pay attention to the CPU percentage that you can, get a little menu marker for, when you're using any app that does streaming or switching or a combination there, Wirecast is the one that I use. I love it. There are others out there. It doesn't matter which one you use. It is going to put a resource hog on your machine. And then on top of that, you're going to go, hey, let me bring in a graphics program, or you might have Photoshop running in the background, or any number of things. You're asking for trouble because at one point it's going to, and everyone's going to do like, what happened, right? So
Right.
It's one of these things where you've got to really think it through. And so, Marty, that is a brilliant move, because that will easily make things more efficient, and you can have confidence in it, which is what we're all aiming for.
And one of the things we want to show in an upcoming show here, and we're winding it down here, we're almost out of time. A lot of you guys have sent in notes and emails stating how you really complimented, and I'm going to switch over to these guys, their chroma key, and you're like, how are they doing their chroma key? And these guys are using Wirecast, and they're chroma keying. I'm just switching back and forth so you guys can see. We're going to show you in an upcoming show how they're doing it with their chroma key. I'm the only one that's cheating. I have an actual TV behind me with a with my background here. I'll just kind of shoot to this. You guys can see this is my background. I cheated a little bit. I'm not using a green screen.
Well, that's because you've got a weather map.
Yeah.
That's right.
For the highs,
That's right.
In Chicago.
That's right. That's right. I wanted to, I wanted to try something else and give that same effect, without having to deal with the green screen and whatnot. But that's something we're going to show. I think it's in an episode, to either the next one or the following one. We're going to kind of get into that, but definitely before Marty's on the road. So you definitely want to tune in for that, because Marty's only using 2 lights. Jeff, I don't know how many lights you're using, but there's different ways to set things up. And I have a
I
green
have
screen
5
over there.
lights.
You have 5 lights? Okay. So I use 4 in the front, and then I've got 4 up here, but I don't have them all at full brightness. But I have a green screen over there for when I use for different things. So we're going to kind of get into that. So you want to stay tuned to On Social. Coming up here in August, we do have a time where I'm going to be on vacation. So the shows will be on a Tuesday and a Wednesday of different weeks. We'll make sure, follow us, go over to Telestream Wirecast. If you're watching this on Facebook, obviously you're probably watching it on the Telestream Wirecast page. Go like that page, follow the page so you can keep up with everything that we're doing. Go over to the LinkedIn, Telestream LinkedIn, give that a like, and stay up with us. Even on YouTube, go over to youtube.com/TelestreamTube. You will see all the archives of the shows. If this is the first time you're watching this, you can go watch it. And I want to encourage you guys. We talked about Telestream sponsoring the show and being huge backers of the show for video producers and professionals. Go check out. There's a free trial. You can go download Wirecast. You've heard us talk about it during the show. Telestream.net/Wirecast. There's 3 different flavors, so maybe you're just getting introduced to this. You can go download Wirecast, which is the brand new one. It's called Wirecast 1, and it's $249. And it'll get you into the world of Wirecast and be able to do some really cool shots and things like we're doing here in your production. So go check that out. We have different versions all the way up to Wirecast Pro, so there's no real learning curve. You could start at 1 and work your way up. But I encourage you guys to go check it out. I think it'll step up your game, just like Marty stepped up his game by going with Wirecast gear. Again, we can't say enough, but guys, Jeff, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And
hey, it's always fun to be here. Hey, quick shout out to Joseph Burke. We're all Blab. We all knew each other from Blab. Joseph was the first Blab I ever saw, and it was having a great conversation with a gal who was turning her life around. And I remember that very well. And so shout out to Joe.
Awesome. So if you guys want to know more about Jeff, you can check him out at jeffinhighdef.tv. I encourage you guys to go follow him. He's a wealth of knowledge, and you'll see him throughout the Telestream forums and the Wirecast user groups on Facebook. And also, Mr. Marty McPadden, thank you so much for joining us, as always.
Thank you very much, sir.
And if you guys are interested, check him out at podjam.tv. And also, you can like him on all the social media networks. And like I said, he'll be around in the different forums and user groups as Marty McPadden. Pretty easy. So you guys will find him. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Stephen Haywood, and you can find me everywhere on the internet just by searching The Tech Buzz. That's how everybody kind of knows me. And you'll also see me in the forums, the Facebook groups, and places like that. Feel free to send a message to me. I don't bite. And I'll be happy to, if it's a show request that you want us to do here for On Social, we're happy to oblige. Just shoot me an email or a message, and I'll bring it up to the guys, and we'll bring it out here on Social. We always have a good time. You guys have a great weekend. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week for more here of On Social.